Today, we will be discussing both some of the new features in development, how that's going. I'll be showing off the building system on the surface of Mars, and then we'll be going into some questions and AMA, which people had sent over on our Discord server. And then after that, I'll hang around for a while and answer anyone's questions they have in chat, anything I can't answer. As I haven't introduced, so I'm Nick, the game development director, and I guess let's get into it. Let me show you what we have been working on so far. So currently what I'm going to be showing you is the building system. So it'll take a while to get into it. As I explained in the previous AMA and in some of our documentation, our building system is mostly inspired off of games like Ark and Rust and Conan Exiles, Valheim, that kind of system. So players have a blueprint that this window you see here, and you place foundational elements and then upgrade them into higher tier pieces. So in the beginning here, we're placing scaffolding, which is like the first tier, I guess. It's like a tier 0. And scaffolding is super cheap to place. It's very easy. You could almost consider it like scaffolding is your blueprint. It costs you basically nothing to place. It's easy to destroy it, rebuild it, however you want. And the idea is that it's quite easy here to block out a building shape that you would like, kind of block out your base, etc. However, scaffolding, as you can see, it's not airtight. Like there's lots of open gaps in it. It provides no protection against the elements. It provides you can't hold an atmosphere inside of a building made only of scaffolding, etc. So once you get here, I'm kind of blocking out a base building shape. And then once you have your building blocked out, then you go upgrading the scaffolding into tier 2 and 3 and 4 and so on building pieces. And as you get up higher in tiers, they begin offering weather protection. They start being able to hold atmospheres within them so you can make the area inside breathable, etc. But let me actually go back to what's going on here. The reason we went with this kind of building system, and some of you may have noticed in the very beginning of Mars 4, when the project was first launched, we were discussing going with a building system which is much more like Subnautica, where you have complete pieces of like a room or a hallway or something like that, and you place the entire piece and then you jigsaw them together a bit. And in the end, we ended up shifting during development to this system because we wanted to give the players more freedom to build what you really want. Like here in this example, you can see I'm building a kind of a circular tower-esque thing, which eventually I'll be putting like a glass dome on top of, like typical Mars style habitat. But not everyone may want to do that. Some people may want to build, I don't know, like Greek temple-esque style buildings. Still, they need to be designed to be able to hold atmospheres and stuff like that. It has to be like well built and thought out. But we wanted to give you as much freedom in the building process to make something that's really your own. So that's why we ended up going with this system. At the foundation, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of structural pieces. And that's kind of our goal. We want to try and make as few pieces as possible that let you build as open-ended of a system as possible. Like you'll notice that we only have triangular and square foundations. Yet with that, here I'm making a building which is circular. I kind of blocked myself in there, if you noticed. So the idea is to try and do that. Keep it as simple as possible, easy to use, but allow the players a lot of creative freedom as much as possible. As I said, one of the biggest concerns is how do you deal with stuff like the weather, oxygen? How can we, like, if the motivation behind the game is to survive the elements on Mars, so we have to address that in some way, and that's what your structural building does. As you see now here, I'm starting to upgrade the scaffolding up to tier 1, and at tier 1 now it is airtight. It can support an atmosphere, assuming you build an enclosed area. So right now, despite having upgraded pieces of it, it's still not, like, if I put an oxygen generator inside it right now, it's not going to be able to hold an atmosphere. I need to fully enclose it. And even after it's fully enclosed, if you open a door or open a window, all the atmosphere that you've produced inside will rush out, which would be a huge waste of energy. So inherently, like, we build a simple, robust system that rewards people playing logically. Like, logically, you should have an airlock. You can build a room without an airlock, but every time you open the door, all the atmosphere is going to go flying out the window, which means your oxygen generators and stuff will need to be working extra hard and far more often, and you're going to be using up more power. More power means more resources burned, and it just creates this kind of negative cycle. So we want to reward good building design as much as possible. Vehicles will be a fairly big thing in Mars. A bit later on in the call, I'll show you some more vehicles that we have in production, which are awesome. But one of the problems is, because you have to survive the dust storms on Mars, we are promoting players to build structures to protect their assets. Because a well-designed building that's upgraded with strong materials will weather a storm far better than just a vehicle outside. So this also creates kind of an endless progression cycle where you build your small little colony, then you get a vehicle, like you mine the resources, you trade on the markets to either purchase a vehicle that's already made or produce your own, or maybe you get one or you rent one from another player who's already built one. And then, well, now you should build a garage for it, some way to protect it from the elements. And then you get more vehicles, you need bigger garages, and the bigger garages, you need more power, so you start upgrading your power systems. And this both gives the player a lot of interesting city planning problems, basically, to play out. But at the same time, it also rewards organized colonies. Like having a organized colony that has a landowner and land managers who are actually putting thought into the design of the colony could have, for example, central power stations that are dealing with all of these structural things. You could pool resources together to build much larger garages that everyone gets their share in, and everyone pays a tax to help afford those commodities that everyone gains access to. So the idea is to try and give players and landowners as much freedom as possible to really simulate building a colony on Mars from the ground up. There, we have the heavy miner transport. I don't think we've shown this to you yet. We will be doing an article about it like we did with the click beetle. And the heavy miner transport is an interesting vehicle. So on Mars, you can be mining by hand, but will also be exosuits that help assist in mining. Because the reality is, due to the Martian surface, it's far harder to build typical mining systems like you have on Earth, just because it's such rugged terrain. It's a problem you have on Earth as well. Like, you may find a fantastic mine, but it's so out in the wilderness, so there's no roads, there's no infrastructure, nothing. It's very hard to get the mining tools to and from there, get the resources, everything. So what we'll be going with the direction of both, because it's realistic enough to make sense, and it's way more fun and way cooler in general, is we will be having the progression system for miners going from a standard dude with a hand tool, a hand drill, up to exosuits, and then even mini mining mechs. So this is another vehicle that we're working on. We haven't actually named it yet, but it is a massive transport, basically. On the back of this, you'll be able to connect up trailers which can house resources, kind of similar to like a modern semi, or I mean, what the concept artist calls it is a land train of death. However, the of death part, I think, is not really necessary, kind of superfluous. But our concept artist is batshit insane. And you can notice this already in game concepts, it's typical to include material references, and his material reference here is all materials are an F-14 Tomcat. That's one of the downsides of the concept artist who designed this, who sexually identifies as an F-14 Tomcat. And I can understand it. It's a very beautiful aircraft, but at times one can go too far. Once again, this vehicle you will also be seeing will be presented to the community and so forth, and will be playable in the game. Here you can actually see the vehicle that I just sent to you, that I just showed the concept art for in initial production. There's still a long way to go, but this, along with all the other vehicles that I've showed so far, are already well on their way in 3D production. In a future AMA, future DevBlog AMA, I'll be showing you these vehicles working in the game. Not sure exactly how long that takes. This will depend on the 3D art production process. Can you tell us a little bit more about the command and control panel in browser? So the command and control panel will be one of the first interactions players will get with the blockchain and their NFTs. And it will include systems for interacting with your inventory. It will include the marketplace. It will include from the game's perspectives, that's the main one. Your inventory, your marketplace, character progression, some of that stuff. And this will also include other stuff that I'm less familiar with. Like I believe in there we'll be adding in some staking or yield farming system. However, don't quote me on that. I'm not the one developing the control panel. However, from my perspective, from the game design perspective, the control panel's objective is to be able to get is to be able to allow the player to interact with the game's progression, even if they're not in the game. So you can be out walking around on your cell phone on the command and control panel, and you can be trading, you can be buying resources, you can be managing your land, doing those kinds of things. Basically, as much of the gameplay as possible that doesn't require, that you can do away from your this main game experience. Is it possible to exhaust the resources on a land, or will they be renewed? No, resources on a land will be renewed. There will be a kind of a respawning, refreshing process. However, it will take time. So if you have more lands, you can mine one land barren, go to the next one, mine it barren, go to the next one, mine it barren, and then eventually continue that loop again. Leveling the colonists through the command and control panel. Tell us about it, or is there another way to level? So the current plan, and this is still in the planning phase, the character progression. But the current plan is that characters will progress through time. And that's not time in game, so real world time. And with that progression, it'll be about selecting abilities and skills to train and stuff like that. Very similar to EVE Online's progression system, if anyone has played that. And that's what you would do in the command and control panel. You would be able to check up on your colonists, start giving them skills, telling them what you want them to be training, etc. And that just happens, whether you're playing the game or not. We've separated those two things because we don't want to punish people who don't have as much time to play. And also we don't want to punish people who are more interested in the grander strategy of the marketplace and trading and buying lands and profiting from the game. Is it possible to build large infrastructure like highways across our lands? Yes, it is. That's actually, this vehicle would kind of require that. It's so large, it can drive across the flat areas on Mars. However, it's not going to be able to even drive over cliffs and valleys and all that stuff, obviously. So that's going to be one of the one of the ways to invest in your land is to be building not only just highways, but also bridges across valleys and other infrastructure to allow people to transport goods through your land more efficiently. Because as I've mentioned this a few times in the previous AMA as well, but one of the ways that we want landowners to be profiting is whenever someone trades on Mars, they'll be using a global market. And when you, just like in the real world, you can buy oil in Russia, but that doesn't mean the oil instantly appears in London. If you want the oil to be in London, you need to first buy it from Russia at that price, and then you need to transport it somehow. And what we want to do is that transportation is a fee that you pay to the market, and then the market will draw a path, the most efficient path between where the product is and where you are, or where the product is and where you want to transport it to, and then every land that it crosses in that path will get a portion of that market fee. So that's a way that lands will be generating revenue in the game, in addition to the other systems for lands generate revenue. So with that, the way that we calculate that best route, obviously there's like direct line, but then there's also infrastructure. So if your land has bridges and roads and stuff like that built across it, it means crossing your land will be much faster. And what may end up happening is, although someone could take a straight line, the straight line isn't actually the most developed route. So the path may go around it, going through the lands that have far better developed transportation infrastructure. So that's kind of the financial benefit to building roads and highways and bridges and all that stuff, to make it someone be able to cross your land as easily and fast as possible. Will it be possible to decorate our bases with your own uploaded designs? Exactly how? Not sure yet, but that is a goal of ours. We already have the system for vehicles. For vehicles, what they'll be doing is we'll have a vehicle itself. So so here's the click beetle. Now, do you see all the areas of it that are tan? Those areas will be able to be retextured with different patterns and so forth. And those patterns are just a very simple, just image. So people, players, whatever, could paint their own style of how they would want this vehicle to be painted and then sell it on the market as an NFT, and other people can buy that paint scheme and apply it to their vehicles. And that will be an incredibly simple process. How we do it for buildings, I'm not sure exactly how we'll do that yet. We do want to obviously allow as much player customization as possible. We have been considering, when I discussed the prop system earlier on, that because players will be able to buy lamps and sofas and stuff like that to place, to also allow players to create and then upload and sell as NFTs these lamps and sofas and rugs and paintings and stuff like that. So there was an interesting question that someone asked on Discord, which I want to repeat here. They didn't ask it for this AMA, and I already answered it there. If you go to the Mars4 Discord, like, I'm basically always there lurking. Just don't ping me too much, because, I still have to make the game. But someone said, shouldn't some lands stay public for roads built connecting critical infrastructure? If all land is private, if all land is privately owned, couldn't people restrict travel to non-land, to people who don't own those lands, and that could get very messy? Or they could try and abuse it by blocking people off and forcing them to pay additional tolls and stuff like that. That's a great question, and there's two ways in game design in general. When you have something like that, like, we don't want that. There's two ways you can go about it. You can either try and ban players from doing it, you can outright make it impossible to do, or you can make it so it's not beneficial. And this is always the way I want to go. So remember when I discussed previously about how trade would work, how trade would be based on that when you buy something on the market and you want to transport it to yourself, we'll draw a line on the lands, across like where the resources are and where you want to receive them. And in that line, all lands that go across it will get a percentage of the transportation fee. If you make your land completely private, so no one can enter it, then your land will always be gone around in the transportation. So you will stop making profit from the transport from the market. Same thing if you try and put additional tolls on your land, so normal people can't even cross it for free. Well, then those tolls will be taken into account when drawing that map, and they'll probably avoid it because it's that pathing algorithm will be trying to pay as little for the transport as possible. So naturally, if you put any restrictions on your land for the flow of people, you will be losing out in profits from the market's trade. When is the release of the single-player game? It is for Q3 of this year. However, development's going really well. I think it's possible that we may have something sooner. Excuse me. Or what I may be looking at doing, I haven't discussed this with anyone else yet, but we may be looking at maybe trying to get a version of what you're seeing right now to the people to play, just the base building. Because honestly, it's really fun. And even just simple like here, where I'm pressing a button to generate infinite resources, and just building a cool base, it's a lot of fun. So I think we may look at trying to get something out even earlier than that. But the official schedule that is live is the single player game will be ready in Q3 of this year. So someone else asked, if one would like to explore the planet with a vehicle, as long as you have fuel, could you go anywhere? Yes, you could go anywhere, but fuel isn't your only requirement. You'll also have to weather the storms. For example, like eventually vehicles will get damaged and need repairs, especially if you're going through like really intense dust storms or lightning storms, or dust lightning storms, which are awesome. Google it, it's super cool. And you also have oxygen and food and water. But these are all things you theoretically should be able to buy along your journey. So assuming that your circumnavigation of Mars, let's say, goes through lots of other colonies and you stop over to buy things you need along your way, yes, there's no reason you couldn't do it. Take a long time though. But yeah, there's no technical limitation there.